are not understanding that process of stabilizing your midline, your foundation, and throwing on the belt, you're kind of one step ahead on where you should be, right? It's kind of trying to learn a muscle up before you got to pull up.
Welcome back, episode 36. Brett, you ready to rock and roll, baby?
Let's get it going, baby.
I think this is a really exciting one because we have so much personal experience ourselves with this topic, and that's what is our personal preferences on certain types of gear that people in our facility use, and in this culture, in this industry. Most of these conversations come out of CrossFit, but there's some gear and equipment that we know other athletes like power lifters and bodybuilders are using as well. But really, that's our core, and we'll extend that conversation outside of that.
Yeah, no, any type of fitness gear is huge in the fitness industry, no matter what types of training you do, powerlifting, CrossFit, bodybuilding. And some gear is utilized correctly, and then sometimes gear is utilized incorrectly. So the point of our podcast today is kind of go back and forth on how to use it, when to use it, all the different types, and kind of, piggyback off each other's thoughts. I'm curious to see why you use this, why you use that. And, I'm excited to kind of give my thoughts on why I use a different type of gear.
Yeah, some of the things that I recognize first is we want to talk about the outcome. What is the goal of the gear in the first place is the question that everyone should ask before they touch the gear. What do they think this is going to do? And it can either do two things potentially. It can potentially increase performance, and it can potentially reduce injury. That's the goal of any gear, one or both of those things. And when I'm asking individuals the same conversation like we're going to ask each other today, it's why do they think they should use that gear in the first place? Because there is no magical piece of equipment out there. There are things that can assist our current baseline, our current skill set, but we're not using that to supplement bad technique.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. You are using that for those two reasons, or one of those two reasons, and not to adapt it as a crutch, right? It's not taking a priority over, fundamental quality movement, doing something correctly. That's got to be the priority, right? And that takes a different type of awareness, and that's what we're trying to, spread that type of awareness through today's podcast.
The other thing that I've recognized too is that cool factor. There's a cool factor to using new equipment, and that comes from the professional athletes. A lot of the trends that I see in workout gear come specifically through the professional athletes, the high-end CrossFitters, the high-end powerlifters, and the high-end bodybuilders. And so the general population is taking that and they're saying, well, they're doing that, then I should do it too. Mm-hmm. And those are two completely different conversations. And so one, I just want to recognize that these trends 99% of the time are coming through professional athletes. And so we have to kind of always take it through that lens, because there's a reason why they should use that, and maybe a novice beginner shouldn't use that piece of equipment, and maybe over time they should. So that's the lens I'm always taking workout equipment from. I'm also personally, as you've noticed when I train, I'm a minimalist. I don't even tie my shoes in a workout 90% of the time. So that's how I take it. But for me, I need to do this through safety most of the time when I'm looking at equipment. And then if I'm peaking, when I know I'm peaking at 90% capacity on strength and or conditioning, then maybe I might use something like that. So those are my personal preferences and biases, because I want everyone to know they have a bias for this kind of stuff. They prefer it over others regardless of what other people say, and they need to take that the information we take with a grain of salt today.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I'm the same exact way, minimalist to the fullest. I only wear it, I try to not wear it as least as possible, and I only wear it to enhance performance, right? And literally I won't throw it on until it's like, hey, my performance is starting to lack because I'm getting to that heavier load. Now I need that little bit of boost, right? But so another example, I got this kind of funky elbow thing going on, right? Some people I've told about it, they say, oh, you should get a wrap or you should get a elbow sleeve, right? And that's kind of, in my opinion, using as a crutch to kind of get me through. It's like a temporary Band-Aid, right?
Right, because they didn't say, well, hey, how do we heal your thing up? They were basically saying the Band-Aid.
Yeah.
How can we keep you moving through pain?
Yeah, it's just a temporary Band-Aid. So, I got the type of awareness. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to try to get right and use gear for what it's worth, and that's to either increase performance, just like you said.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think this before we talk about certain equipment is that ultimately, especially from the injury side of stuff, if you're using the piece of equipment because it slightly helps the pain that you already have, and you're not trying to deal with the root issue,
Yep.
you're in big trouble because it's going to Band-Aid it enough for you to keep working through that. And then ultimately, until a traumatic injury or a chronic issue occurs, that's going to put you out for good.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's get rolling. Let's go with the format we kind of talked about, before we started rolling. I'll pick a piece of gear, a piece of equipment, and you can kind of give me your take on it, and then I'll follow up with it. Cool?
Sure. Let's do
So
it.
first one, chalk.
Bro, why do you got to do that to me, dog?
Because I know. So before I let you get into it, if you've been to our gym, we rarely use chalk, and if you are using it, you didn't get it from us, right?
That's hilarious. Or they snuck it in, dog. There's some sneaky suckers out there bringing in their own chalk.
So, I've never trained with chalk since I've been here, my 2 years. I've never been, it's not something I use frequently. So anyways, let's get rolling. What do you got on chalk?
I recognize there's a personal preference. As a business owner, I didn't see the sense of it. Like you and many people, no one has ever used chalk until they jump into a CrossFit facility. And then it becomes this wonder drug. Like, they're doing it, so should I. And so what happened is people were using it and they didn't know why, or they felt like everything needed to be chalked. So they didn't really understand the goal of chalk and when it should be used. And then two, personally, as a gym, it caused havoc. I was picking up people all the time. It was disrespectful the way they used it. They misused it and abused it. And so we just took out the chalk, right? Mm-hmm. Two, the obvious one is for performance. They felt like by using the chalk that they can find better grip on things. And this goes back to the same issue we talked about with the elbow, which was the chalk is masking a really big issue. And that is you are using the chalk just enough to get adherence onto objects because you don't naturally have the grip. And so that's what I wanted to recognize. The lady can't hold herself on there. Lady or man, I don't gender neutral here. The individual jumps on the bar and they can't sit in a hanging position for 30 seconds. There's no chalk in the world. There's not enough chalk in the world.
Magic piece of chalk, right?
That's going to hold you up there longer than that. And that's your issue. You should be able to sit on a hanging position 1, 2, 3 minutes at a time at the hang. Mm-hmm. The chalk is not your issue. The grip is your issue. The other thing that I wanted to recognize is that there are only a couple times where people should use chalk. For me, if you look at, remember the trends come down for professional athletes. Chalk is very common in Olympic lifting and powerlifting. When they are taking loads at 2.5, 3 times body weight, hell yeah, use chalk. Mm-hmm. But there are individuals here that were using quarter body weight, half weight body weight, even 1 times body weight using chalk. The ultimate one for me is I saw a lady one day grab chalk before she went to do medicine ball cleans, bro. Just didn't, right? Or they were using chalk for handstand push-ups.
Oh, come on.
So
there's no grip in that.
It doesn't make any sense. And so what happens is it just became this all effect where you just used it for everything. And so I've just been a staunch proponent. Like, listen, I'm deadlifting 450 with no chalk. I'm doing 30 pull-ups in a row with no chalk. Does it add some extra form of friction and adherence that you wouldn't have otherwise? Definitely. But for the majority of people, chalk is completely unnecessary. The other thing, the irony of all this, is that what I recognize is that people that use chalk rip their hands most often because chalk dries the hands. That's the effectiveness of the chalk.
Yeah, no, I've heard people like to use it to keep their hands drier, for sure, and not have sweaty hands.
Exactly. So they were getting a little success with the chalk, but they were ripping their hands most often. And, hand care is pretty simple. Keep your calluses small and keep them moisturized so that the skin can take the stretch and the pull that you're giving it when you're pulling and hanging on things. hand care is simple, but very difficult to follow up long term. So what we recognize is people just ripping their hands more. It didn't make any sense. And so ultimately, chalk is not a saving grace for people, and I want to recognize that. Someone comes to me like, Mario, dude, I'm about to pull 3 times my body weight. Dog, I'm gonna that chalk I have hidden in here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go bring it out.
Yeah.
But it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah,
it hasn't happened yet.
It's all about, like we stated earlier in the podcast, is that type of awareness on why you're using chalk, right? Why you're using it. You can't use it as a crutch. You can't use that as a crutch. If you're going to ask for chalk every time you're doing a set of pull-ups, you've got some grip issues right there that you got to assess, and chalk's not going to save them.
Bro, drop-ins come to me. They look at me like I'm crazy.
Oh, me too.
I don't dot the sentence. I say, no, we don't have chalk here. Because if you want it, if I had that same convo with them, they think I'm crazy, bro. Mm-hmm. They think I'm crazy.
What
here's
you got
one.
For me?
Belt. What do you think about using a belt?
Okay. Well, I'd say the biggest misconception about the belt is it kind of will prevent low back injuries, or if you have a current low back injury, a belt will magically save it, right? When, the one word that comes into mind when using a weightlifting belt is stability, right? Mm. That is what the weightlifting belt is for, is, wrapping around super tight on your core. Okay, take a big breath, hold it in, push into the belt, and that combination of your big belly full of air with the belt is going to keep you nice and stable, right? Dude, I'll be going around the gym sometimes, not our gym, but, other gyms, where I see people wearing belts for like bicep curls and, seated machine leg curls or something like that, right? At that point, people are just using it as a crutch, but, it all comes down to that type of awareness like we talked about on why you would use a belt. What's your take?
No, I agree. I think there also needs to be a baseline strength. You should be able to back squat your body weight. You should be able to deadlift your body weight in a quarter, body weight in a half before you touch the belt, right? At 315 on the deadlift for reps, I'm grabbing the belt. At 315 for back squat reps, I'm grabbing the belt. Those are probably the only few times that I grab it. I'm going to 1 rep clean and jerk. Max,
grabbing the belt.
I'm grabbing the belt. Mm-hmm. But I have numbers in my head for when that is. Not, I'm doing those lifts, so I might as well grab the belt.
And you have a sense of awareness on how to keep your core stable before you even put the belt on, right? You have a sense of how to, keep a nice tight midsection without putting the belt on. So if you are not understanding that process of stabilizing your midline, your foundation, and throwing on the belt, you're kind of one step ahead on where you should be, right? It's kind of trying to learn a muscle up before you got to pull up. If you can't brace and stay stable without a belt,
you're not going to do it with
then you're not going to do it with a belt. So you got to kind of train without one to the point to where, like, okay, I understand this concept, and then once it's finally on, that's when it enhances the performance.
And, as coaches, we're giving tactile cues to belly. They're pushing out. They're not sucking in, right? Most people think they're bracing belly by sucking in. No, we're pushing into that, creating intra-abdominal pressure. That used to be called the invisible belt because it still had that feeling because you were pressurizing against that area where the belt would be placed. But, yes, the skill needs to be built on without the belt and move towards 90% capacity work, then you put on the belt.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next one I got. Let's go with grips. Grips. No, I got to switch that up. We just talked about chalk. I want to talk about something grip-wise. Let's go knee sleeves. Knee sleeves and knee wraps.
Yeah, so I think one is to define the difference. A knee sleeve is going to be a compression. Compressions, they're building out now. They're standard at 3, 5, and 7 millimeters. So the thickness is really important with a compression. Do I feel like people should use compression sleeves, knee compression sleeves? I think it helps do a couple things that's harder to do naturally and longer. One, not get the knee warm, but keep it warm through an hour class. That's really hard to do. So I prefer a light compression at like 3 mil. That does really good to keep the knee warm. the thicker you get on the compression on the knee sleeves, one of the things we know is that it can limit range of motion. So if you already have knee issues, you lack range of motion at the knee, you might even struggle even more with the compression of the knee sleeves. So you have to recognize that there are different thicknesses of compressions. Do they work? I think they do. I enjoy wearing them. I don't wear them all the time, like I said, but I have seen better comfortability and less inflammation post-workout using them than without them. But again, there's differences between the style of knee sleeves. Two, the wraps are very common in powerlifting, very, very common. But I think functionally from what we do here, it's not very purposeful. Unless we were spending a half an hour on the back squat,
makes sense.
the knee wrap doesn't make any sense. It takes 5 minutes just to load both knees on the knee wrap. Do I think if you're squatting 500 pounds
or competing,
knee wrap is phenomenal. And that's why a lot of those guys use it. Remember, what I said originally is a lot of these gears are coming out of professional athletes, and then the general pop is coming in saying, maybe I need that too. If you're putting on a knee wrap at body weight for the back squat, I'd be really concerned about the health of your knees, man, because your knees should be able to take on that compression, right? Without the knee wraps or the knee sleeves. I do think functionally using a compression knee sleeve, we do this a lot. For lunges, high rep lunges, you're gonna go rock out 200, 400 meter lunges. You wanna put some knee sleeves on so you don't bang up your knees. Yeah, that makes sense to me. But we're not using them as a crutch for anything.
Yeah, to kind of sum up your points, I think it's safe to say sleeves is more functionality when wraps are more increase in performance. It could add anywhere from 20 to 50 pounds on your squat, right?
Yep, that's very true. But it takes, when I was powerlifting a long time ago, it took me a good half dozen sessions to use that knee wrap properly, because there is a technique to how you do that and how much tension you put around that. And the idea is supposed to take some compressive forces off the knee. There are some Russian high-level lifters that use knee wraps. Very unique to watch. It's a very old-school style of training, but they're using knee wraps for Olympic lifting. Now remember, these are guys who are lifting 1 rep at a time, 2 reps at a time, at maximal loads, 400, 500 pounds overhead. Makes sense. But again, it's a very technical way to wrap the knees for sure. So you got to learn how to do that through a pro, not YouTube.
Yeah, no, we got a nice little trend going on each piece of equipment, and that's basically having a foundation before you even get there, right? Before you even throw it on, you have a foundation on what's going on before you throw that piece of equipment on.
What's really good is that what came to mind is progression. People should have a progression for equipment gear, when they should and shouldn't use it based on the technicality and difficulty of the movement.
Yeah,
right?
baseline.
Yeah, have a baseline, progress through equipment gear based on need, right? I know, here's another one for you because you rock them a lot. Weightlifting shoes. When do you think you should use them, and if so, when?
Well, let's go over the multiple types of, we'll call it fitness shoes, right? Not even just strictly weightlifting, but fitness shoes, which is, one is Olympic lifters, right? Those are known for their raised heel, right? It's kind of giving you an increased ankle mobility, most important for clean and jerk and snatches, and you can obviously squat with them as well. Another one, that's most common in the powerlifting stage is like flat, completely flat. Converse is a big one. Vans are another big one, and those are best utilized for powerlifting, deadlifts. You can squat in those as well. And then there's obviously the traditional running shoes, right? You can throw something softer that absorbs the impact a little bit better. Use running shoes. And then there's kind of multi-purpose shoes. Metcons are a good one. The Nanos, the official CrossFit shoe, is another good one. But so basically, you got to have that awareness on what type of movement you are doing and why that type of shoe you would be wearing for that type of movement, right? But if you have limited ankle mobility, don't use an Olympic shoe as a crutch. Work on your mobility, right? Or if you're powerlifting, you can try to learn it without shoes. So when you put on a shoe, a flat soled shoe or whatever, it transfers a little bit better. And then running is running. You can't go from using running shoes to run a mile and use those same shoes to back squat, right? You're not going to have the same support to move a heavy load in a squat. Then basically running shoes are very, very soft and they absorb impact.
Yeah, there's a famous weightlifting quote. It says, "Don't have a 10-cent squat and a $100 pair of shoes."
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is the shoe's not going to save your terrible mobility or the lack thereof. And so we have to have a baseline of capacity. Can the individual freely and smoothly move through the squat without pain or incapacity or the lack of range of motion? That's number one. Two is, what is the goal and purpose? What makes group training the way we do here is that it's a really unique structure in that we've put many different disciplines together as one. You are powerlifting and Olympic lifting and running all at the same time. So you have to always take that consideration. Are weightlifting shoes great for lifting heavy loads? Definitely. Are they good for lifting heavy loads and having to go run a mile? No way.
Hell no.
So we have to always consider it. I see some athletes that when I work out with back squats and running, they keep their weightlifting shoes on. That's not what I want them to do. I also don't want them switching the workout, switching their shoes in the middle of the workout. That doesn't make any sense. The clock it's defeating the whole purpose of high intensity. And now if it's a strength day and we're doing nothing but the barbell, you're coming in here on Barbell Club on Sunday, bring the weightlifting shoes, man. They will help long term. But we're not trying to mask any issues where I'm like, oh, this dude's got terrible range of motion. Oh, why don't you buy some weightlifting shoes?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't fix the issue. Cross trainers are great, but I think long term for running, they're terrible. I mean, people complain about that all the time. By the way, running 200, 400, and 800 meters at a time is not long distance running. Use cross trainers. Are you running anything above 5K and above in a row without stopping? Get a good pair of running shoes. Now, for me, I'm always considerate of, extremes, meaning I can't go from a high profile shoe with 5 pillows underneath it and then just naturally try to move into a squat the next day. There's just too many extremes. So even with the running shoe, I'm very considerate of how big the profile is, how much cushion they're putting into it. I want enough to support my feet, but not so much it throws me off at anything else when I jump into a cross trainer or something like that. So that's also really important to me.
Yeah, basically, you got to be aware on the trade-off you're willing to give. Hey, I'm willing to give a little less comfortable on my 800-meter run to feel a little bit better when I do some weightlifting inside the gym for that piece, right? You're trading off a little bit of comfort somewhere and a little bit of discomfort somewhere else, but as long as it's not too far off, I think you're right on the right track.
Yeah, man, we're on it. And last one, wrist wraps.
Okay, I think we can go. This is the grip, right? We're talking that, or we're talking. Okay, let's kind of ran on both the wrist wraps and the gymnastic wraps.
Well, I guess you're right, because there are some gymnastic wraps that are throwing the grips on it, the suede grip, but they're also now like a bear complex. They're giving you a wrap around the wrist as well. So, yeah, I mean, I'll go wrist wrap. You go. I already talked. You go grips. I go wrist wraps. Wrist wraps. I think over time the stress of the wrist is going to become burdensome for everybody? Yes, because the shoulders are going to get 10 times stronger than the wrist can ever curl. And so the wrist is a supporting structure for all pressing exercises. Whether you're standing press or you're inverting into handstand, the wrist is taking on a lot of that stress. There's only so much. We're not going to jerk around and do wrist curls in class. We're not going to do it. We can develop some of that grip strength through static holds, farmer's carries, hangs, things like that. But ultimately, it still does not compare to the increased mass we're going to get in our shoulders. So I do think over time, having a supporting structure on that wrist, even something as light, I've stopped using gymnastic wraps because I felt like they were too much of a crutch because it's 3 and 4 ply long, and I moved to a light athletic tape. Just
Okay.
something light, 1 or 2 ply, and I'm done. So I'm getting some support, but I'm not crutching it out.
You're not losing flexibility at the same time.
By putting that on.
Yeah.
But I know it's there and it's supporting me a little bit more than if I didn't have anything on that day.
Yeah, no, it's providing support, but not to the extent to where you can't bend or move your wrist through a range of motion, right?
Yeah, and sometimes those gymnastic wraps will do that. But some people can do it well. I've seen some great success with people using gymnastic wraps. So you got to mess with that a little bit. Again, what's the end goal? Are you in pain? Do you put the wrap on and it takes away the pain? Great. Okay. Now how can we get this wrist to move irregardless of wrap and still feel good? Mm-hmm. Both of those things need to be tackled and addressed at the same time.
Yeah, it's safe to say a poor front rack position is not going to be saved by you putting on a pair of wrist wraps, right?
Not at all.
You got to address, and that's so freaking common. Someone will do a front squat for one of the first times, and their wrists start to hurt, and their instant go-to is, I got to get a pair of wrist wraps.
It's bad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone should be using wrist wraps if they're having pain in the rack position. I think the only goal for me are wrist wraps are supporting the wrist during any pressing motion or isometric press motion when we're holding or doing barbell holds, or for a lot of the pressing stuff that we do. Even maybe bench is another pressing that could help. A very common high level powerlifters are using them for pressing.
Yeah.
But rack position, man, I'm really
You gotta
worried
attack those
because they're
weaknesses.
already giving it up. Your wrist is hurting because you have such a lack of range of motion in the shoulder. You're taking the bar, rolling it off your last 2 fingers. Of course your wrist is going to hurt. It's going to hurt anyone who's putting 150 pounds on 2 fingers on the wrist. We got to go back to the technique, man. We got to look at some of these really common issues versus like, oh, my wrist hurt, let's put on wrist wraps. It's not fixing the real issue.
Yeah, it's just like we talked about earlier, it's that temporary Band-Aid, right? It's that temporary Band-Aid. And in regards to using wraps for all the pressing motions, it's kind of like the same reasoning for using a belt, right? It's stability. A belt is used for core stability. Wrist wraps are used to keep your wrist stable, right?
Yeah. That's really good. And the other one you talked about is grips. What's your preference on grips?
I don't use them often, but it's just because I haven't got there yet, right? If I were to compete and they showed me a workout is, hey, let's do 100 kipping pull-ups for time, right? Or a stupid, like, large amount of muscle-ups for time, right? I know I'm going to be hanging on that freaking bar more than normal. So the least amount of times I got to come up and down off of the bar, the better, right? So if I'm using gymnastics wraps, right, that's what kind of with the topic we're getting on here, then that would aid my performance. But, just like everything, I'm not going to use that because I got sensitive hands, right? Or I'm not going to use that as a crutch. I'm using that because, hey, my foundation's set, but I need to increase my performance the best I can. I'm going to throw on gymnastic wraps to compete in that workout.
Yeah, that's really good. So we're not masking that grip, right? The only time I would like someone at high, remember, it's coming from high level athlete down. Watch when they use it. They don't have grip issues. The most 2 common exercises they're using this for are bar muscle up and ring muscle up. So I'm looking at that, and they're chalking 2 on the leather wrap.
Oh,
so think about this.
That kills me.
What's happening is they are not using it to grip, right? Think about this. They're using it for rotation. So they're using the leather wrap with chalk to rotate their grip around the bar so they have a smoother turnover. That's why they're using it. But the general public doesn't recognize that. They think they're using it as this miracle hang on the bar. Most of those guys aren't even wrapping that gymnastic wrap that you place the 2 fingers on. They're not even putting it on their fingers. They're using it to wrap the leather around, the suede around the bar, so it reduces all the friction that you would have if you went skin and chalk to hand. So it's a rotational cheat. It's a rotational cheat.
Mm-hmm.
They're not using it for grip. that would be perfect for them. But and then there's some really crazy. Like if you like, I always put myself in other people's shoes. Like if you look at a high-level athlete, a high-level gymnast, and you saw what CrossFitters did with that, it's a debauchery of the tool because they only use it for high bar and rings. They don't, like CrossFitters now, they'll turn the suede on, use it to wrap, or they take it off and a minute after they're turning the suede wrap over so they can deadlift. I mean, does that make sense?
No, yeah, it does. If you're kind of running into situations where you gotta adjust your gear accordingly because you're going from one thing to the other and it's slowing you down or it's setting you back, whatever the case may be, you're almost at a disservice, right? You're wasting time, you're losing functionality, and you just basically are using that thing as a crutch at that point.
Yeah, there's a meme where the guy's got all the CrossFit gear on and he looks like a complete jackass and he's like, I'm ready to work out.
No, there's that one video too that it's like
all the different... he's in the bands or the mobility drills. Have you seen that one?
No.
He's in all these different mobility drills and he ends up using like 10 different bands and he's like free hanging on the bands.
No, there was like I think I might have sent you, there was like 5 stereotypes of the type of people in a CrossFit gym.
Yeah.
And there was one guy is the gear guy, right? And he's got sleeves, knee sleeves, wrist wraps. He's got
the whole belt,
headbands.
Hey, headbands are important, dog.
Yeah, man. I mean, hey,
keep sweat out of your eyes. Come on,
bro. Come on, man. If you had a drop in, come in with a headband, bro.
Bro, oh my God, don't get me started, bro. Don't get me started. Anyways, no, but I think ultimately, as much as we joke and critical about some of this equipment, for us it comes back to we wanted to sell good quality movement, and never did we believe that people had to move well with equipment, right? For me, it was, if we're moving to the extreme of high level performance, some of these individuals are going to need this type of equipment. But for the general novice athlete, general population, for the majority of people, they don't need stuff like this. But I just... what I want people to consider is like, please don't do stuff because you see other people doing it on Instagram. Please do the research. Don't take my word for it. Look up credible information online and back that up with your own experience. But please do not start using gear because other people are using it.
Yeah, no, you just got to understand why you're using it, and you have to make sure you have a baseline or a foundation set to the point where this is increasing performance or whatever the reasoning by throwing on this gear on, and you just got to make sense out of it, right? It's got to make sense to you. You got to understand what or why you are using it.
That's it, baby. We appreciate you guys. We'll see you next week.
Catch you next time.